Good morning. Hello. Welcome. Hello. For those that don't know me, I am Kelly Northwood, the CEO of the Visual Media Association. Most of us are friends in the audience, so it's great to see so many of you and all getting ready for the big event tonight at the Real Media Awards. This is our third Open Up to Mail Industry Insight, which we've had our third this year, and we'll continue this journey next year. As I've been talking with some members this week, everything in the letterbox is printed. Everything is printed, apart from my new shoes, which I also hope will be coming next week. But this is a great opportunity for us to really harness this media channel and not only connect with the letterbox that then content comes into each and every one of our homes. That's print communications that come into our homes, into our spaces. The physicality of what we take from the letterbox has resonance and recall and engagement on a sensory level that print really outshines. However, we don't live in a single channel universe, and we work so complementarily with other channels. And the research that we're talking to today, and also tonight, I'm going to give you a sneak peek of my speech later, is actually really leaning into the role that print plays in a modern era. And we've got to remember the actual reason why we started this journey and started working with our key stakeholder partners, and thanks goes to Australia Post, IVE Group and the Mail Industry Coalition for being key stakeholder partners in this journey, is actually understanding from the government's consultation to the modernisation of the postal service what role the letterbox plays in Australian society and New Zealand society for that matter, moving forward. And the role that we're seeing is one that is really effective and relevant from a sense of community, a sense of understanding what's going on in my local community, my local suburb, my local sports club. There's a real resonance, and we talked about that in the second session, which really focused on charities. The role the letterbox plays in communicating the value of charities and the social consciousness that we all play and the societal balance. We are talking today about retail, unaddressed, direct mail. These are a really key communication pathway for our industry, and the retailers and brands in the room and online can really talk to and understand about the power of print, from a catalogue to a magazine, the conversation that continues when you walk into the home to television, radio, when you continue that conversation further and we go to in-store, and any brand activations teams in the room or online then talk about continuing that journey again, and all of the touch points that we as consumers engage with, and the role of some digital, some television, some established, some establishing media channels, but how they all complement each other. And I often say print, letterbox, mail, established channels have a really great marriage with incoming and new channels. So you're not here to listen to me, you're here to listen to the research, and I want to introduce our speaker today, Matthew Swinson. He's the Managing Director of The Source. The Source is our independent research agency who we've commissioned this year and continue to work with throughout all the different chapters of the letterbox and beyond. I'm going to get my glasses because I'm horrendously bad now with my eyes. Matt has been working in research and strategy for 18 years. I've introduced him 3 times. You think I would know this by now. In UK and Australia, in that time, he's worked with some really amazing brands, Tesco's, Amazon and Google in London, and locally Woolworths, Telstra and the Victorian Department of Health. He's particularly focused on behavioural research and behavioural science and trends, which I think is really important and really leans into today's presentation. Retail, brand, media marketing is always looking at behavioural trends, path to purchase, and that's why today's really rich. I'm going to dob you all in the room in right now and everyone online. As Matt's talking us through his research and what he's found, we're going to do a Q&A session at the end. I don't like to do Q&A sessions on my own, so please start thinking about all your questions as Matt's talking, and hopefully we can have a really rich conversation at the end of it. Welcome, Matt. I appreciate you giving us talk, and let's hear about retail. Thank you.
Every time I see that photo, I think I should have shaved. I should have shaved that day. All right, so a little bit of background about what this research was about and why we did it in the first place. Sort of three boxes in terms of the purpose of the research that we've done, and some of you have seen this before. It was to understand who the letterbox consumer actually is, what it means to them, how different Australian consumers and New Zealanders relate to their letterbox, the role that the letterbox plays in their information and media ecosystem. As Kelly mentioned, everyone's sort of touching different media channels, and to understand what role the letterbox and print plays within that. And also just to sort of understand a little bit around the behaviours that the letterbox and print materials influence, and how it pushes people towards brands and influences their shopping or brand decisions. In terms of how we did this research, and again, apologies to anyone who's seen this for the third time, but it's always good as a reminder. We started off with a qualitative phase. Qual is essentially when you go out and you run groups and you do depth interviews and you talk to people open-endedly about the matters that I just mentioned before. That took the form of two phases: an ethnographic piece where we got people sort of writing letters to their friends, documenting the things that they'd received in the mail, and essentially just opening up to us about what the mail letterbox means to them. And we also ran some focus group discussions, which I'm sure you'll be familiar with, but really the purpose of those were to deep dive on the role of the letterbox in consumers' lives. Following that qual work, we ran a quantitative piece of work, and a quantitative piece of work is essentially where we put a survey out into the wild and get a large number of people responding to it. In this case, it was 1,500 consumers, and the purpose of that was really to sort of build a sense of awareness, of sense of intentions and behaviours around what people are doing with the stuff in their letterbox. Now today, a lot of the data that you're going to see is quantitatively led, but there are sort of a couple of little qualitative stories that we'll dot in along the way to bring those numbers to life. Today's session is quite pointedly about catalogues and the role of catalogues and how people use and engage with catalogues. And we're going to sort of start by having a look at the role of catalogues in the modern time, where cost of living is riding high in media headlines and in consumers' lives. So we'll start by talking a little bit about cost of living. Now, you know, there's a lot of data out there in the world right now around cost of living. We've decided to join that float, and we're running a 6 monthly cost of living tracker, where we just touch base with Australians every 6 months about the effects that the cost of living sort of crisis is having on them. I sort of want to mention a few data points here because they feed quite nicely into the role of catalogues, printed catalogues in consumers' lives. The first point to make is that we're seeing consumers being increasingly open to substitution. 85% of our audience say that they are more open to trying new brands and products compared to what they were 12 months ago. We're seeing consumers using loyalty programs more. I think the retailers would say the same thing. 81% of Australians are using loyalty programs more than 12 months ago. We're seeing consumers tell us that they're increasingly hunting for deals, and it's taking up more and more of their bandwidth and more of their time. We're seeing that people are telling us that they are squeezing the last drop out of products they've bought. 89%, particularly high number there, saying that they're making conscious decisions to make products last longer. And the final point there is around how they're approaching brands and retailers. 68%, over 2/3, saying that they are shopping around and visiting multiple stores. That is particularly true in grocery, where it's even higher. But it goes to show just how, I guess, the sentiment around cost of living is actually folding into behaviours. Now, retailers certainly aren't standing still in the context of cost of living. There are so many initiatives out there, so many programs that are being rolled out to meet those evolving needs of consumers right now. One of the ways is that I think the visual language of value is a little bit more different. one of our respondents talked about it being Chemist Warehouse world out there right now. Value is a shout. It's very loud. It's not just gentle reassurance. And a brand like Chemist Warehouse is sort of taking the lead on that. Loyalty programs are increasingly being offered. We've seen Rebel come online with this. We've seen Spotlight come online. We've seen Everyday Rewards and Flybys really sort of step up their activity as well. Home and own brands are being rolled out, particularly true in grocery, but you're seeing that as well. If you go into a Target now, you can buy Anko, and there's just such a wide array of different products and categories that home and own brands are available in. And we're also seeing just the rise of hyper-personalised deals on relevant products, obviously directly related to those loyalty program initiatives that retailers are rolling out. Now, there's lots of options out there that are really helping consumers get the value that they're quite explicitly looking for. So I guess it begs the question of what is the role of a modern retailer's catalogue or a retailer's modern catalogue in today's world? And we see both functional roles and functional benefits, but also some more emotional benefits attached to it. More functionally, catalogues are a key part of shoppers' routines. A lot of gross, supermarket shoppers will tell you that they almost start their list planning when the catalogue hits their mailbox. People tell us it's the easiest way to compare prices across categories and across stores. People tell us that it makes sure that they don't miss out on a great deal without having to walk every single aisle and be particularly attentive to all the price points and promotional activity. Consumers tell us that they feel a catalogue showcases the best value in store and do a great job of covering the entire store. But consumers also tell us that it helps them to discover new products and discover new ideas that have come out into the market. And that leads directly, I think, to the more emotional benefit that I think particularly a printed catalogue provides for people. It inspires and delights. And I love this quote of someone telling us, it's the thing you don't know you wanted until you saw it. When we're in this hyper-personalised world, when we're getting emails that are based on all the stuff that we've bought in the past, a catalogue coming out and sort of having quite a sort of a broad range of product involved really kind of helps inspire and delight people. The breadth of product range and element of surprise, it does feel really exciting and feels very inspiring. So that's a little bit of context that I think will feed into some of the more sort of pointy data around how people receive and use catalogues. We asked a big, wide question at the beginning of our survey around, of the following printed materials, what specifically are you receiving in your letterbox? It's interesting, the two bars in yellow are the specific catalogue call-outs there. Is that they are amongst the most prevalent materials in consumers' letterbox. This is not weekly, this is just more broadly, but around 2/3 of our audience told us that they receive a supermarket catalogue in the mail, and around half tell us that they receive a non-food retailer's catalogue in the mail. Now, it does tend to be a little bit higher amongst those 55 years and older. That's purely because of their living situation rather than, and their location rather than anything else. And we'll talk a little bit about how readership and engagement is quite an interesting story when it comes to demographics. But amongst those who are 55 years and older, it's over 2/3 or just on 2/3 are receiving grocery catalogues, and half tell us that they're receiving retail catalogues. Of those people who are receiving catalogues, who is it that they tend to who is it that's dominating share of minds? Well, it's Woolworths, it's Aldi, it's Chemist Warehouse, and IGA. They're the four brands that we've sort of picked out, just for the purposes of this session, that do tend to be dominating share of mind. I think if we'll look at the sort of the numbers and then sort of almost talk a little bit more about the sort of the different benefits that people tell us a printed catalogue bring to that particular brand. But in terms of the numbers, in terms of actual sort of recall, 81% tell us that they've received Woolworths catalogue in the last 12 months, 72% Aldi, 65% Chemist Warehouse, and 43% their local IGA. If we go into the sort of the brand-specific benefits of each, and these are sort of the commentary that we've gathered from people in the groups and as in our broader discussions. For Woolworths, it's the editorial content that people do quite appreciate, particularly when it's around new meal ideas and inspiration. They appreciate the fact that it champions fresh produce through the Fresh Market Update, which is a sort of a branded area in the middle of the Woolworths catalogue. When it comes to Aldi, people wax lyrically about the Aldi catalogue. It just does a brilliant job of encapsulating the weird and wonderful things that people find in an Aldi. The special buys catalogue is just an exciting and inspiring way in which to tap into consumer spontaneity. Chemist Warehouse, quite a different conversation around Chemist Warehouse. People, the sheer volume of content and products in the Chemist Warehouse catalogue is loved. It's just that it really does bring to life what they see in the store. There's great deals all throughout, and there's just numerous products. For IGA, it's sort of almost the IGA catalogue does a great job of showcasing that it too has value credentials. It's a sort of a credible value provider in the world of grocery. A question we asked people who don't currently receive a printed catalogue in their letterbox. We kind of wanted to posit the question to them: to what extent would you actually like to receive something from the following brands in terms of a catalogue in your letterbox? And I think the response was actually very positive. People told us that they would be interested. The numbers there sort of speak for themselves. But when you get to some of those more the mass market or mass audience brands, the Kmart's, the Woolworths, the Bunnings, the sort of desire to receive something in terms of a catalogue in their letterbox is particularly high. It does trail a little bit off as you get to slightly less mass market brands like Freedom, but that's not because of Freedom. That's just because the market is a little bit more pointy. I think one of the key reasons for that latent desire to receive something in their letterbox, a catalogue in their letterbox, is the reading experience. People tell us that they're positive about the experience of reading a retailer's catalogue. They find it pleasurable. They find it relaxing. These are some attitudinal statements that we put to people. We ask them, to what extent do you agree or disagree with the following? I can't afford a newspaper or magazine subscription, so receiving a free catalogue in the mail is great. You've got 2 and 5 sort of agreeing to that statement, and you've got almost half telling us that they find it relaxing to read the catalogues that get delivered in their letterbox. And I think this is where print can really sort of steal the show in terms of being a more relaxed and focused read. It forces people to take a break and mindfully engage with content. If we go back to that audience of people who are receiving retailers' catalogues in the mail, we ask them which of the following best describes what you do with these materials. And what we saw is that engagement with the catalogues is particularly high. Over half are looking through most pages or every page of the Woolies, Aldi and IGA catalogue. That's kind of not, you don't really see that kind of level of engagement in the work that we do across other channels. And I think it just speaks to this fact that the material is getting handled and it's getting read. And what's interesting, if you almost look at the negatives there, of the people who discard without reading, is that those numbers are quite small. Sort of 1 in 10, 2 in 5 are saying that they discard without reading. Most people, most of the time, are touching and engaging with these materials. Now, I think what's kind of interesting as well, we sort of wanted to look at who are these people who are engaging? Who are the people who, go through most pages or every page of these different retailers' catalogues? We've broken it down into some sort of demographic breaks. And interestingly, the demographic breaks are completely uninteresting. Because usually you'd sort of see there'd be kind of weighting towards certain segments of demographics or locations or wealth, and we just didn't see that in terms of engagement. We asked people, those people who look through most pages or read through every pages of a particular brand. If you start on the left-hand side there, it's evenly dispersed across different age groups. Woolworths, for example, there's just no real difference in terms of engagement between those who are between 18 and 34 and those who are 55 plus. Chemist Warehouse, maybe a slightly different story there, but that's more about their audience than it is about the sort of the engagement with the catalogue itself. Locations, again, relatively sort of evenly dispersed. And I think what's particularly interesting is when you look at affluence. I think sometimes we have this kind of maybe slightly negative stereotype of the traditional catalogue reader being a bit older and a bit poorer. It doesn't bear out in this data. Even for a brand like Woolworths or a brand like Aldi, you see those who are slightly wealthier, are just as likely to read through every page or most pages of their catalogue as those who are slightly less affluent. So that socioeconomic thing doesn't seem to be playing out to the extent that I think some people sometimes stereotype. Now, we know that sort of the print catalogue, as Kelly said before, the print catalogue doesn't exist in a vacuum. A lot of catalogue of retailers who provide their catalogues in a printed format are also doing so through, whether it's digital means, through their website or through a specific app. Now, we asked people, of those people who receive the sort of the relevant catalogues that retailers' catalogues that we were mentioning before, do you also access them online? 56% of our print readers at Woolworths are also accessing that catalogue online, 32% Chemist Warehouse, 30 IGA, and 29 Aldi. I think what's interesting is when you actually sort of force people into playing the reading experience off between the printed catalogue and the digital catalogue. I think the data is quite clear on this, because as we ask the question, how does the experience of reading catalogues online compare to reading printed catalogues? Which do you prefer? And a higher proportion of our audience, 47%, told us that they prefer the experience of reading a printed catalogue. Now, it's worth sort of paying attention to those 22% who prefer the experience of reading a digital catalogue, because when we got into the sort of the verbatim and the rationale for those reasons, it tended to be around transportability, about people sort of, particularly a younger audience, just being a little bit more digitally native and wanting to take their phone around with them. But if we sort of look into the sort of the specifics around why is it that you actually prefer a printed catalogue, why is the reading experience better than it is digitally? People tended to cite the physical features, the ease of use, and the opportunity to actually just switch off from digital. And these are direct quotes taken from our survey, which I'll sort of paraphrase a little bit. If we look at those who sort of cited the physical features, they're easy to read. I can take them with me and read as and when I want to. You can look at it multiple times. If you see a special you like, you can mark it or tear it out. You can't lose it. If you talk about people who sort of have cited ease of planning as a reason for preferring the printed catalogue, I can bring the paper catalogue to a store and show the staff an item I'm after. It's quite a sort of an adversarial kind of relationship that people have with team members there, but it's almost like a sort of to make sure they're getting the value. And it's also someone here telling us as well that it's just so much easier to use when writing a shopping list. We see as well, and this is through some work we've done with different retailers, is that people aren't just using the printed catalogue to write a shopping list on paper and take it into the store. They're also using the printed catalogue to look straight at the digital, the online store. So there is that kind of cross kind of behavioural activity when it comes to print and digital. And we've got people telling us as well, and we saw this, I think, those of you who came to our first session, is that there's a lot of fatigue around digital media right now. There's a lot of wariness around it as well. But people quite just explicitly say, I just want to switch off. It's less stressful to have a printed catalogue compared to an online one. When I do it digitally, I get distracted, which is kind of seems to be a problem of our times. If we go into a little bit more around, I guess, the effect that printed catalogues have on consumer behaviour. We saw from this data that they influence store and product choice. They help people manage their budget, and they are particularly, and just in more general terms, they are very influential in the shopping experience. So if we go into the data there, the top one, printed catalogues help me to make decisions about where to shop. We get, almost 2/3 of our audience agreeing that yes, a printed catalogue does help me to make decisions about where to shop. It also helps me to make decisions about what to buy. And finally, it helps me, it's that selfish but quite sort of meaningful reason, is that it helps me to manage my budget, which we know is so important to the mass market right now. If we sort of go on from sort of intention to sort of slightly pointier data around actual usage, we asked people of all the different ways in which people might use a printed catalogue, which ways do you use yours? It tended to be for store choice, budget management, and product choice. And I'll come on to that final sort of pale pink box in a second, but 55% of our printed catalogue users sort of say that they're using them to compare prices across stores. 52% saying that they're using them to get the best value for money. It's a strong data point, that one. Almost half are telling us that they're using them to choose which products to buy. And I think it's sort of, whilst it's smaller, this number of people who are using a printed catalogue to get inspiration for brands and products is just, it's not significant, it's still a significant minority of usage, is that they are really serving a purpose to inspire and delight. And I think, in a time where money's tight, it's a really, it's a thing that people still want and they'll look quite openly toward. Now, just rolling that data out to show the full tranche of data and the full number of reasons as to why people use and the behaviours that they engender. I think rather than sort of going into every single data point here, I think it's interesting to point out just how many people are using a printed catalogue for so many different reasons. Quite often in research, when you're in a quantitative questionnaire, you put a range of sort of different statements, and a few people will tick the top one, and then it'll just diminish massively. But what we see here is a trend that, I use a catalogue for so many different reasons, and it brings forward so many different benefits. If you go into some of the softer side of what a catalogue does, though, yes, printed catalogues are all about sort of affecting consumer behaviour and sort of directing consumer spend, but they actually do positively influence brand relationships for some. Almost half of our audience stated that they feel good about receiving a printed catalogue from a brand that sends one to them. So that's almost half of our audience saying that they actually agree with the statement that receiving a printed catalogue makes me feel good about that brand. Now, that does trail off a little bit more as you get to the statements around a brand that cares about me. I trust the brand more, makes me feel loyal to that brand, because there are so many different variables that'll fit into that equation. But the numbers still tell quite a positive story, I think. So we are seeing positive effects on brand equity from a printed catalogue in the mail. As I bring all that together, and I hope I haven't whistled through that at such a pace that it's all sort of diminishing, but to summarise that and to bring it all together into a single slide, what does this research and what does this data tells us is that a printed catalogue plays a varied and important rather than import role in consumers' lives. Engagement is high. Over half of our of our audience were looking through most or every page of those grocery catalogues. Relatively few are telling us that they discard a catalogue without reading. When it comes to engagement with them, I think it's interesting again to sort of dispel that myth that it tends to be an older, less affluent consumer. This data tells us that it has quite broad appeal. Print readers tell us that they tend to prefer the reading experience of a printed catalogue. Printed catalogue readers also have shown us that it positively affects their behaviours. It influences their brand choices, it helps them manage their budgets, and it is more generally just influential in their entire shopping experience. I think they also, that last slide I was just talking about, they do have, not perhaps to the same extent as behavioural influence, but they have an emotional influence as well on brands. Almost half tell us that they feel good about a brand that sends them a catalogue through the mail. And over and above all this, catalogues do really have this potential to inspire and delight. I'll say that sort of quote that came straight from a consumer because I love it. The thing I didn't know I wanted until I saw it. And then this hyper-personalised world, a printed catalogue does something quite different here. Now, in terms of ways in which to optimise catalogues, now this will be different for different brands and different retailers, but there are general rules of engagement that we've noticed in our conversations with consumers that can lift the effectiveness and influence that a printed catalogue can actually have. Firstly is around the front page. The front page really does set the expectation for content, and the better the promotional activity on the front page, the more likely you are to read it. I mean, I guess the tabloids know this particularly well, and we feel like retailers can almost embrace their inner tabloid, really lead the front page with value shouts, half-price deals, great reductions on hero products. Editorial content, it's quite an interesting conversation to have with consumers, is how much editorial content should be in a catalogue, as opposed to prices and promotional activity. In consumers' minds, the catalogue is there to showcase great deal and to help them manage their budget. That's what it's there. But editorial content absolutely is welcomed. It helps to break up that deal-heavy content. It makes for sort of a more mindful reading experience. And B, it has the great opportunity to inspire and delight, and really give people that sense of surprise that they didn't know they were looking for. So we feel that the best editorial content tends to focus on new products and has a direct connection with promotional activity. That's when editorial content almost gives you the best bang for buck. And the final point there is around events. I mean, we know right now that when life is tough, events help lift people's mood, but they also bring their own sense of tension. Events are expensive to plan for, and if you've got kids, kids have these quite sort of outrageous ideas and extravagant ideas of what an event is actually going to look like. We feel that a catalogue can do a really great job of helping consumers bringing the ideal into fruition, giving people, signalling great value around events, and showcasing products and ideas that can actually make that event special and memorable. And that is a whistle-stop tour of some catalogue-specific work. So yeah.
I'll usher you across to your comfortable chair. As Matt is, I'd like to introduce Rebecca Yock, who will join Matt. For those who have attended session 1 and 2, they will know Rebecca with 20 years experience, director at The Source and head of Qual, Rebecca has also got some very big brands and experience under her belt, again across the UK with Sainsbury, Unilever and Boots. My favourite retailer of all time is Boots. In Australia, the Victorian Government, CUB, Bunnings, Big W and Woolworths. Welcome Rebecca to the stage. Rebecca's also done a lot of work in the focus groups, so can lean into some real feedback in that regard too. Thank you, Matt, for your presentation. It's different to see you up here on your own, actually. You're both sort of quite fluid, and just on your own, it's sort of, oh, I felt a bit, I need to come and join you or something up there. So thank you very much. Going through all of that content, there's a lot in there. For those in the room, this is the Q&A section. No one gets to be quiet. I will pick you out if you do not put up your hand. You know what I'm like. I'm notoriously terrible at that sort of thing. However, you're a little bit off the hook because we have 92 people on live stream. To all of you on live stream, one day I'll get you to take off your Uggies and come into some of these events. Welcome. There are some questions coming in thick and fast on live stream. So I will once again pop on my little glass weasels and off we go. The first thing, one of the things that I just want to comment on is that Matt said, value is a shout. I think that is an awesome line for any retailer or brand in the room looking at how they can really harness the Letterbox channel in a world of cost of living pressures, tension around seasonal. This value is a shout, is an opportunity. Whether you are communicating a Chemist Warehouse, I think was the reference you were leaning into, Matt, there, or a brand like BCF who has a very different approach to their marketing. They are all communicating, all of the retailers and brands are communicating the value of coming and buying from me, and that value is a shout, is so strong. It's a real sentiment that I hope all the brands and retailers in the room almost go and put on their whip in their studio thinking around what content is going into their letterbox marketing, DM, loyalty or catalogue unaddressed. There was a lot of brand specificity. I've just sort of lent in it there. I'll ask my first question and roll through into the live stream and in the audience. Across those major brands, Woolies, Aldi, IGA, Chemist Warehouse, these are strong, big retailers that we have strong recall, some iconic. However, how is the catalogues, or how are you seeing some of that? I talked about brand specificity briefly then. It's almost like they're very different brands in how they're communicating. You talk about Woolworths content, it's marketplace. They're communicating around fresh food. They're communicating nutrition. There's recipes and things like that. Chemist Warehouse product range, value. So what are you seeing, or is there something? What about other brands, smaller brands? How can they really harness and keep their message on brand, but use that letterbox channel? What sort of insights can you pull from what you found?
I'll take that one. Look, I think the sort of, it's interesting to use the examples of Woolies and Chemist Warehouse because those two catalogues are so different. But what they both do really well that I think is a good learning for all retailers is that they essentially encapsulate the store. So, people looking at the Chemist Warehouse catalogue will tell you it's chaotic and it's so much in it and it's great value and it's exciting because it brings that retail experience to life. So Chemist Warehouse, I think, as an example, have great license to be very, very packed and promotional content led in a way that perhaps Woolies doesn't. And what Woolies does, I think, quite well is that they bring more of that sort of editorial content in. They talk about the good acts initiatives that they're doing, the support that they give to local communities, to the sort of the support that they give to farmers and showcasing their growers. So I think it's that the best examples of it tend to be of brands who almost bring their brand to life in a sort of in the way that they express their content through the catalogue.
But in terms of what you said about local brands, and I think we had this in another piece of research in one of the other sessions, is that people actively want to see more local, smaller brands in their letterbox. They want to engage locally, and I think that there's a lot of permission for smaller brands to get in people's letterbox. And I guess it's, as Matt said, it's about the catalogue reflecting that brand, and it can do such a good job of building the brand as well as selling product or having vouchers. A lot of people, we focus on catalogues for this. A lot of people talk about Domino's, Uber Eats. I mean, they're big brands too, obviously, but having a 10% voucher in there, giving something back, a little bit of added value. And I think added value also comes with the catalogue's editorial content. Because as we saw, people aren't buying magazines at the moment. People aren't always getting a newspaper delivered anymore. So a catalogue or a bit of longer form content gives people an opportunity to have a cuppa, sit down, and actually read something that they can no longer afford.
We're certainly seeing in the numbers one of the largest growing sectors in unaddressed is what we call the magalog. So we sort of come up with this, is it a catalogue, is it a magazine? It's that blend, and it's certainly engaged richly. Content is really so rich now more than ever, and certainly in COVID it was really strong too with everyone locked down. So I think that's really good. It leans into my question that's come in live stream, which it's about that trust. There's a few sort of retail trust indexes sort of mucking around a little bit at the moment, which is hurting a little bit in trying to build that brand equity and re-engage as a brand and communicating that. We've seen this with Facebook, Cambridge Analytica. They went completely to print. Print is one of the highest trusted channels, and how we can use that in the letterbox, catalogues, unaddressed, direct mail. The question here is, how do printed catalogues positively influence brand loyalty and trust, and how can big and small brands, this keeps coming back, big and small brands really get into that trust? We also talked a little bit before the presentation about consumers are still taking their catalogue into the store. It's sort of, if it's printed, it will be that price. Digital, there's not as high trust indicators. So how can brands lean into, or brands and retailers lean into the sort of loyalty and trust influences in unaddressed?
Yeah, again, we saw from other pieces of research that print is more trusted in general, so we know that to be true. So then I think there's also this element of trust and care. Like, another thing that came out of the research is that there was this fantastic quote from the groups. It's like, if a brand bothered to print a piece of content, staple it together, this was the actual quote, staple it together, get somebody to deliver it, then I'm going to read it. There was a sense that they've gone to a lot of effort, and there was just a level of care that happens when you get something in your letterbox that people don't always believe has happened when you've seen a post on Instagram. So I think that also builds trust, this fact that they've entrusted this piece of content to you, they've put an effort into doing it. But I think just fundamentally print is more trusted. So then it comes in your letterbox, in your community, in your neighbourhood, it sits on your kitchen bench in your house. Then there's all this warmth and emotionality around that I think just builds trust through the very channel and the fact that it is in your hand.
I think in one of those quotes that I brought up as to why there were so many people who preferred the physical catalogue reading experience over and above the digital was the person who takes the catalogue in store, shows it to the team member, that this is the price that you said it would be, now you take me to it. So it's quite an adversarial sort of relationship to have with a team member. But in times where, particularly around certain brands whose trust metrics have nosedived, that is a really, it's a really strong way in which to sort of to build them back up and prove that they're good for it.
I think there's, we discussed it earlier as well. I've been researching and working across unaddressed space for 14 years and been working with researchers for 14 years. And taking a catalogue into store is a behaviour that has been reported for 14 years of research, which indicates, despite we live in a very disruptive media era, there's lots of channels coming in and having different strengths and relevances, and having some consistent consumer behaviours 14 years on not only shows my age, but shows that we're nice and stable in how we consume media in some of the channels. I love the question also, sorry. Matt, introduce.
Oh no, sorry. I just wanted to, I think it's related to what we're talking about. Is that we see people tell you that they, and I don't know whether retailers see this in their call centres or in their chatbots or whatever. People complain when they haven't received their catalogue that week. It's still, I think it takes up a significant amount of retailers' time to field those complaints, and sometimes it's the team members in store who have to field those complaints. So
We certainly, we run the Distribution Standards Board. A shout out to Di, who manages that hotline. The biggest spike in complaints is when a catalogue has missed its delivery window, comes on Wednesday instead of Tuesday. It's very, very disrupting for Australians. So lucky Di fields all those calls, and I'm very appreciative. Another, to your point, Rebecca, about that sort of, I staple and put it, I feel like a brand has taken me. Emily in Paris, I'm sure you're all avid viewers. There's a wonderful line where she's planning the PR for a particular event, and she says that they said, "Oh, we'll just do some social media." And she says, "Oh no, I want to be on the front page of Harper's Bazaar," and "Oh no, we can do all this social," and so on. She says this wonderful line: "Anyone can do social. Not anyone can get on the front page of Harper's," and that's that real lux of that real, print has got that real resonance. I keep going. I'm going to go to the audience soon. Someone knows I've got a question coming. So the next one is leaning a little bit further into this brand loyalty. It seems that this is a real area of space that's resonating. You mentioned, Matt, in your talk just about there is this sort of at the beginning, there is this appetite and a cost of living pressures to try new brands. So the question here leans into that a little bit, saying, what does the research say about shifts in brand loyalty during times of economic stress, and how do retailers adjust their branding strategies to keep their loyal customers while everyone is looking to, well, I could probably just buy that milk a little cheaper, or, those sorts of decisions. How can brands really remain relevant to their loyal customers in these sort of times?
Yeah, look, it's not a easy answer, but the sort of different categories and different brands people are having changing relationships with in terms of loyalty. I think what we see that's true across brands is that people expect brands to be working for it in terms of, show that you kind of you want my custom, and one of the ways is was on that second slide I think I put up, where there's so many retailers by and large then aren't standing still when it comes to meeting these evolving needs. If I bring maybe clumsily bringing the catalogue back into that, is that it has such a key role in actually proving to someone that you want them to shop with you. It's actually, it is a very, very strong, open invitation to, and sort of clear and transparently putting, these are our products, these are our prices, come and spend your money with us. And I think people appreciate the effort that's being put in there.
I think offering added value, and I do think that's where, as Matt said, loyalty programs are becoming more and more important for people. We talk to people and they'll shop at Aldi. Now, Aldi doesn't have a loyalty program, so the people, if they're doing more shopping, but they're still going to go to Coles and Woolies for certain, and the loyalty programs will draw them in because there is something else they're getting at. So then you look at things like, and this is very specific to supermarkets, but you look at things like, saving money for Christmas, banking points for Christmas. So that's actually really useful for people because Christmas, so that's understanding that Christmas is a really expensive time of year. Or spend stretch. It's about making those loyalty programs work to the current challenges people are having. Because you're right, people are being less brand loyal, and also on products at the supermarket, they might have always bought one specific brand of washing detergent. We know people are very full on about those sort of things. We're seeing that change now. So sometimes specific brand loyalty, but retailers, I think loyalty programs are a great way, and just an honesty and added value. And I think that's where the catalogues can bring added value when it comes to recipes, or 10 ideas for Halloween, make some stuff with the kids. Those little nuggets build brand warmth.
And I sort of hate the word empathy because it gets overused, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's not true. But I think brands that do have empathy around events, because we do see, and when times are tough, people look more and more as events like Christmas and Halloween and Easter as being a really nice punctuation mark to a shitty year. But if a brand can reach out to them and really kind of say, we've got you on that event, we can help out, that is appreciated. And I think that was why one of the reasons we sort of pulled events forward as being quite a good opportunity for a catalogue. I think it really can help build that relationship.
Retailers love nothing better than a seasonal event. Halloween, Easter, Christmas, Father's Day, and they give a purpose to the communication. What's really nice, I think, for a quant guy, you've talked a lot about the qual, the real social, sort of emotional elements that are coming in, and I think that there's that really nice, when you talk about value, there's loyalty programs, and that's a really strong, that's why I'll shop there for the points to get that value. There's also the value, you used Audi as an example. The value is you get your catalogue in and you've got this window of getting great buys. So there's value in all of that. And I think smaller brands can consider how they can add value in all of those different ways, whether it's a voucher, whether it's loyalty, whether it's actually honing into a consumer behaviour. And I think that's sometimes a whiteboard brain dump, isn't it? To just sort of really pull out from what's working in the mass major ends as well as some of the smaller. Any questions from the audience? Brendan had a question. Brendan Coughlin, IVE Group, welcome.
Thanks, Sarah. You noted up there that there was a consumer who bought a catalogue into store, and we've linked that to trust and trust in print. Were there any other elements that came through in the research that highlighted the trust the consumer has in print?
There's the sort of the original.
Yeah, in the original data, obviously print, people are, there's the whole scams online, so people get nervous. Do I know that this is for real? Sometimes people are deleting emails because they're just not sure. So they're not reading them because they don't trust them. So there was a great sort of statistic on the earlier pieces we presented as part of Open Up to Mail, which was like, quite a large, can't remember the percent, but I've never had a scam in my letterbox. Whereas people are much more mistrustful, so sometimes people won't even open something. And actually, some people had even said that they'd missed the odd thing in their letterbox, in their inbox, in their mail, because they thought it was a scam. So I think there's just a general feeling you don't get scammed in the letterbox. I think that really builds trust. I think it's interesting recently, where there's been this, something happened recently where people are now there's a lot of mistrust about signing up for things, and not, whether that be streaming services or all these different things that we're signing up for and we can't get out of them. So that's another whole area that's been in the media lately, I know, about people not trusting that. Like I've signed up for something, I want to stop it, and it's so complicated. So I think in general, a lot of online, it sounds like a cop-out answer, but I just think print you're starting at a baseline of so much more trust. Not necessarily because of what you're doing, but because of what all the digital stuff is doing. So that's what's highlighting that you're a safer channel.
And it's not a perfect answer to trust, but there's another TR word that I think works for consumers, is around transparency. There's something around the physical nature of a thing that you have in your hands that shows transparency in terms of price, that shows that this is the product, this is how much it is, this is how much is, what the promotion is. I guess for a lot of people that's almost like a shorthand way to get to trust. It's a funny one. Trust is, the reason I kind of looked at Rebecca hoping she would answer the question was, I think consumers find it difficult to talk explicitly around trust. And I think that point that you make, it's the context of trust is what matters. And when there's so little trust elsewhere in the world, being a beacon for it is what print potentially can do. I hope that answered your question. Good.
Thank you. Any other questions from the audience? Tom Eckersley Print Group.
Thanks, Kelly. Matt and Rebecca, I was just curious about any insights that you have developed about the letterbox's the owner of the letterbox changing perception about their environmental footprint.
This was an interesting point that I think we had in our first session, is that the sustainability, considerations, those environmental cynicism around print, that wasn't coming up in this research. It's almost like when you ask people in a quantitative survey, do you care about the environment? Naturally, you're going to have people sort of say, oh, yes, of course I do. When we had conversations in the focus groups where that wasn't a pointy question, nobody was telling us is like, oh, thank God I'm not getting any, that particular the Coles catalogue anymore because it's bad for the environment. That just wasn't rising high in people's minds. And
We had this lovely quote, which I thought was an interesting example of that. So I had a slightly curmudgeonly man in one of the focus groups, and he was a little bit anti-print, and he did talk about, it's landfill, and he talked a bit about that, and he was talking about some of the supermarket catalogues because he didn't read them, and he wasn't particularly interested in them. So he was being a bit curmudgeonly, and I said, okay, and he wasn't interested in them. So it was very easy for him to talk about junk mail and sustainability, but he was a keen fisherman. And I said to him, oh, so if you got the BCF catalogue delivered in your letterbox, or, something a little bit about that particular interest, how would you feel about that? I would quite like to get that. That'd be quite interesting. I'd quite enjoy that. So it kind of highlighted to me that, and then we had a statistic in the survey which was like, how interested would you be to get something in your letterbox that you were genuinely interested in? And that was quite high. So it suggests to me that people, if you get something you wanted, and sort of you're not really going to be too worried about the environmental impact of that. So it just feels like that was it's an easy default option for people who don't feel like anything worthwhile is coming to them in the letterbox.
absolutely, yeah.
Anyone else from the audience have, yes?
Do you have any data that shows, so we know catalogs show value, do you have any data that shows that catalogs are today less or more important than like 3 years ago?
We don't have specific data that you could say that this metric has grown in time. People will sort of tell you that, particularly around value, that the catalogue is more important than ever. But we don't have a specific measure to say it's grown by an X, by a factor of X, But the data is kind of, in terms of importance around cost of living, the data suggests that catalogues specifically are more important now.
And we've been working with retailers for a number of years, and we have seen, and this is anecdotally, that catalogues are more important because what people are doing is shopping around. So pre-COVID, there were always people that shopped around. What are the specials this week across all the retailers? I'll work that out and I will go to 3 different stores. COVID kind of killed that, and we saw that people stopped shopping around because of safety, or because they couldn't be bothered, or because, COVID. So they stopped, and now what we see with the cost of living is that more and more people are actively shopping around. So they do their shopping every week by checking all the retailers' catalogues. There's a lot of people who are doing this, and then they will go to 3 different stores to get what they want. So we know people are shopping around more, and we know that the catalogues are a really big part of shopping around.
I have to wrap up. I'm sorry. So I know there's a few online questions. We'll try and come back to you post to those questions online. I think we've covered them anyway in some of the discussions. A couple of things. I think. Firstly, thank you to Rebecca and Matt. I think they need applause, for their time. I think we've got some real takeouts around the cornerstone role that catalogues are playing, that print is playing, that the letterbox is playing. We know, and I said in my introduction, and Matt really continued that with the data, is we aren't, consumers aren't just living in a funnel and looking at one channel and one channel only. Some of the research we're seeing is, depending on sector, we're looking at 2 to 3 different media channels regularly, and how we can also use the catalogue, which is actually often the one in that cornerstone decision-making process, or one of those media channels that they're regularly engaging with, the role that can play, because a catalogue can talk about a lot more things than a TVC. It's got opportunity to lean into product range. It's got opportunity to talk about a value item. It's got a longer conversation, a longer dialogue. And print generally has a longer dialogue. It has a longer dwell time, dare I say. It has a communication period that we can hone into and harness and use the short disruption of digital to actually have a longer conversation. So those dialogue times are really important, while we need to think of all the roles that they play in our channels, in our channel selection. VOPMAG, for those who are not registered online and in the room to receive your VOPMAG or to receive your EDMs, the white one's about sustainability. The sustainability questions is all about the research around sustainability across all the channels that we represent. This one was about data. It's got a lot of data and some of the content from the insights. The next one that's coming out with music to all the ears of today's topic, which is going to be very much focused on retail and how we can connect the dots in a multi-channel universe. We will be very much privileged to have our two thought leaders in that magazine also. The Open Up to Mail website has all of this content, so please use it. Those who are in the room and who registered online will receive the live stream recording, so you can share, come back and watch and listen to our dulcet tones for as long as you like, and continue to really understand some of this content. It's got to unpick it, we've got to apply it to other channels, we've got to think about it to our own brands, and I encourage you all to do that with your teams. We are preparing for have a bit of a break, and we'll come back in the new year with our next Insights series in 2025. We'll spread them out a little bit more next year, but again, I really do want to thank our support partners on this, Australia Post, IVE Group and the Mail Industry Coalition, of course the Visual Media Association, and all of the members, board and officers in the room. Have a great day. I look forward to seeing all of you tonight with your 70s disco party shoes on. That's why the nails are like this. They'll be back to normal at the next one in the new year. Thanks everybody, and have a good day. Thanks for joining us.